I'm Pam Hanna, and I've been coming up here for about 80 years. My mother and dad brought me up when I was very small. My grandparents had built this cottage, and they brought me up to stay. And as I got older, my mom and dad would come and spend a week here. And as soon as I was old enough, they left me with my grandparents, and they didn't come up and stay. They just came and delivered me and then let me stay and picked me up. And I had the most wonderful summers up here.
I'm Jean Robertson, and my parents built here in the 30s. My dad was told that there was a piece of beachfront property along the path, and he should really go and have a look at it. So he did, because of course the path was there all along. So he came to a clearing, and here was his property with 200 feet of sandy beach. Well, my parents had a big family, so he brought my mother up, and as soon as the two of them saw it and talked about it, they thought, we'll buy this property. So they took a drive that day around the lake down to Baysville, along the south shore to Dr. Dixon's.
Our grandfather, he was my grandfather, laid out all the lots.
At that time here, there was no road, there was no power, electricity, and it was pretty primitive in that respect. But nevertheless, as Helen said, he was an engineer and a surveyor, so he divided the whole Clovelly property up into, I think, 24 lots.
They were going to have a golf links down near the Needlers. They were going to have a golf links down there. It was planned to be big and elegant, and it just never amounted to that.
And that was in about year 1912, 1911, somewhere in there, because I think this cottage was built about 1912, as was the Hickey cottage next door and the Lockheed cottage, which is just around the point. He built 3 cottages as a business venture, and he was hoping to either sell the cottages or rent them out, but preferably sell them. But the First World War came along shortly after that, and people were involved with going to war. And
they couldn't sell them, so I think some of the principals ended up buying them.
I think that's it exactly. And one of them went to the caretaker, Colonel McCullough, who lived in his, and his family lived in it after that, so it went down through his family.
Whitehouse got its name. There was a hotel called Whitehouse, which is around the point from here, and Pam and my grandparents came up to Whitehouse in the teens, and that's how they found this property. They would go for walks. They'd come in on the steamer and took the train over the portage and would come in, and that's how they were introduced to the area.
And they stayed at Whitehouse overnight, and Granddad walked over here, got the boat that was in the boathouse, and took it over and picked up Granny and your mother and all the baggage and some of the food.
Oh, that's after the cottage was
Yes,
built.
yes.
But before the cottage was built, that's how they were introduced to the area.
Oh, it was how they came in originally.
Yeah, they stayed for a few summers at Whitehouse.
And the Elliott family built it in the 36, as I said, and we're here for quite a long time. And then when the folks passed away, the 2 daughters took over. And I don't know the whole story, but they couldn't agree when they could use it, so it really didn't get used at all for many years, except by the mice and the squirrels and the chipmunks.
We have quite a story in this cottage. It was owned first by the Johnsons, and he was a minister. And my good friend down the lake can remember coming up here Sunday mornings, and he would have casual Sunday morning services on the rocks.
When I say my grandparents built it, they had it built.
With Granny supervising.
Well, yeah, Granny was supervising. The story goes that she contracted with a guy to get the logs, which are tamarack logs. He delivered, but he was also supposed to build the cottage, and for reasons long ago lost, he backed out. And so here they were with a load of logs and no one to build the place. So some of the local men, the Aldrids from Whitehouse and the Boothbys from Point Ideal, said, okay, we'll build it for you, although they'd never built a log building before. And so they set about that summer, and they built it. And Pam's dad was taking engineering at that time. He would have been in his early 20s, and he built the sleeping cabin bias, so-called because it's on a slope on the bias, and so that he could be available to help.
Okay.
And how much he and my grandfather actually physically helped with the building, I have no idea. But they built it in the summer, and 90 years later, it's 90 years this year, and it's still standing.
Times got tough. There were deaths in the family. Mother tried to rent this one, and she was a widow by then. She just loved it, and she'd stay here by herself. So it started with Grandfather Terrell, and then then our mother's generation, and then me, and Huey, and my brother. I do have a picture of the three of us. Because when my mother sold, when Grandpa gave the cottage to Mother for a wedding gift, I guess, because it didn't sell anyway.
He wanted to get rid of it, so he didn't have to pay the taxes, which
Likely.
were probably $1 a year.
She figured, and there are some notes and things that indicate the years, but that because the taxes were $30 a year for this, it was a double lot at that time. And the insurance, fire and whatever, was about another $30. And the, $30 for things that came along that needed repair, and to hook up the water system. A spring. These cottages, the 3 cottages, were fed by a natural spring back in the, and it had to be connected, the pipes connected in the spring, and they had to pay a man. So Mother kind of figured that between Huey and Ted and I, we could handle $100 a year, maybe. It's hard to, but that was likely a lot of money.
At that time, there was no electricity. We had oil lamps and fireplace, and that was it.
In the kitchen.
Yeah, wood stove in the kitchen kept that part of the house warm.
We were here from 76 till 94, and did a lot of changing things around, and there wasn't any way to get in here except stopping at the top of the hill and walking around the cottage and coming in the front door here. We decided to put a driveway down the far side, and I knocked out a window and put in a door to the back room, which had been the maid's quarters off the kitchen. It didn't look at all like it looks now. It had been virtually abandoned. There was no glass in the windows like this. The squirrels and the mice and everything else had taken over this veranda. It only had a half wall. So my wife said, "You're really interested in that property?" I said, "Well, look at the lot. Look at how close you are to the water."
We bought this cottage in 1994, and we had been looking for a cottage. We'd been renting over on Lake Rosso and had rented for many years, and had come to the conclusion that we didn't want to be on a big lake. We walked in, and the centerpiece of the interior of this cottage is this beautiful giant stone fireplace. And we sort of walked in and we looked at that. The doors had been open to the screen-in porch, and there we stood as we walked into this cottage. To our right was the fireplace. We opened, these double doors open to the screened-in porch, and this vista of the lake. And it was just, we looked at each other and we said, "This is it." We didn't know anything about the lake. We didn't know anything about the neighbors, and we made a decision on the spot that we would buy it. And on the way down in the car, we're going, okay, we're trying to figure out, okay, it's more money. How are we going to figure? And we're going through, okay, if we did this, we did that, okay. So we ended up buying it, and it's been the most remarkable experience.
Our grandmother had a story that the window behind Pam was my grandmother's bedroom. And one night, this would have been in the early 20s, just after the cottage was built, she woke up in the middle of the night and this wall of her bedroom was red. And she couldn't figure out why. Well, that was the night, you may have heard this story being over at Norway Point, the Wawa Hotel burned down. It was a frame
And there
ho-
weren't the trees between
because
us and the cottage over there, and the lake is just on the other side of them. So.
you could see across, I
Oh,
realized.
so it was actually the reflection.
It was the
Yes,
reflection,
yes.
reflected light of the
Of the
fire.
fire.
And I couldn't, when I first heard that, I couldn't figure it out. I thought, well, all the trees, but
No,
they
well,
weren't
they were
there
there.
in the early
Well,
20s because they were,
when we
they were
were-
low. They were low. Because this area had been clear cut and this is all second growth. Sounded pretty
So
much
when
we
second
were
growth,
kids-
but
And we would go up to the meadow. There were raspberry bushes, there were crabapple trees that hadn't gone too wild. And, but sometimes we would go halfway up because there was a flat rock there, and we'd take a little picnic up there. And we could see over the trees right down to the lake.
the first part was when our
Grandparents came.
first came, you couldn't come in by road.
This is where the steamboat used to come in.
You took the steamers through Ferry and Penn Lake and the Portage Railway across to Lake of Bays, and then took a steamer. And I guess initially, certainly when they were going to Whitehouse,
Yes, to
Whitehouse
Whitehouse.
was the closest steamer dock. Later, they built a steamer dock at Clovelly.
It wasn't a government dock, it was the government of Clovelly Point cottages. If you wanted the steamship, the Iroquois, to come in, you held up a flag, a white flag on a great big pole, and that would indicate to the helmsman on the Iroquois that somebody wants a ride into the portage or over to Bigman or somewhere.
And in 1922, when they built this, that was the only way in. And Pam had said earlier that for the first few years coming to the cottage, my grandfather would come over and we had a boat, and he would take the boat back to Whitehouse, and so people didn't have to carry the stuff along the path and come back. And I think the first road, I have a topographic sheet from 1929, and it shows the road that we now call Whitehouse Road or South Portage, same thing, came in as far as Whitehouse. And that was built sometime between 1922 and 1928, I don't know exactly when. And until the early 50s, that was as far as you could get by road.
From the Whitehouse in, it was pretty bad. I mean, the three kids would sit in the back seat of my father's car, and we weren't allowed to talk because he had to concentrate on the road from the Whitehouse to Clovelly. It was just a dirt track, really, wasn't it, originally?
My dad would let us off out of the car at the Whitehouse.
Yes.
And he would drive by himself on that road. This was in like 1934 or 35, 36. And he would drive on this awful road through the woods and in the meadow and then down. He was low gear to do that, but we walked the path.
My husband hitchhiked up here when he was 18. I was 15, and courted me up here. And my mother let him stay. I mean, what do you do when somebody hitchhikes up?
That was in the wartime.
They liked the guy.
It wasn't until, was it 52 or 53, South Portage Road as we know it now was pushed through. It was an extension of the road that went to Whitehouse, and they blasted through the rock to create South Portage Road. I don't know how long, when they were going to blast, it was usually in the afternoon, they would blow a whistle, and everyone's supposed to go into their cottage.
Quick,
And-
run.
And it's a wonder, no cottage, to my knowledge, was ever damaged.
Well, no, Granny said they landed on the roof.
So the rock that was there before the road was built is all on the bottom of the lake out there now.
Wonderful for raising
Yeah.
our children. It was also wonderful for the friends. I can remember you and I were great friends and did a lot of things together.
Oh,
I
yes.
met wonderful people up here, and so did my children.
I've always loved it up here. Ever since I was a young child, either across the lake or here. I just like being here.
This is something very important to each of the boys. They just think this is the best place in the whole world.
Our daughter Nancy was married at the little church in Norway Point in 1989, I think, and the following day was the twin girls' birthday. We had all the people who came to the wedding were at the birthday party at our place down the hill, and that was a big celebration. And the girls that came from California to the wedding just had skimpy little dresses on, and they thought they were coming up to a nice hot summer place. Well, that was when Hurricane Hugo went through, and we had snow in the air that day. It was cold as heck.
Our kids were friends.
Yes.
Your Ian and,
Yes.
and Reed were friends and got into lots of mischief.
Our kids, our son is a bit older, and he got on to swimming quickly and got into the sailing club. And our daughter wasn't very far behind. She was 2.5 years younger.
We had a christening at the little church of my youngest grandson 3 years ago. And my son in Calgary was married in the little church over there.
My generation, too, were around when the Lake Bay Sailing Club was formed.
That's right, the
And-
first year.
And the first year, we started on Big One Island.
Robbie had his honeymoon here.
And when people have honeymoons here, a friend of Karen and myself, I had my honeymoon.
Your granddaughter had her honeymoon here.
Oh, and my granddaughter 3 years ago.
The youngest, who was 12 when we came here, and spent his first 3 or 4 or 5 years at the sailing club, literally, day and night, became an avid sailor. He's now living in Hungary, and he brings his family here every year for 9 weeks, because this is where he wants them to be. 2 boys, both heavily involved in the sailing club, but this is to him, this is home.
Sailing Club had, I don't know, a dozen albacores,
Yeah.
and we beached them there, and then we would go out and we'd sail every day.
It's so great because you can go over there, you can play tennis, you can play all sorts of things, and you meet a lot of people. If that hadn't been there or me over here, I would never have known all these people, and it's fantastic. It's really great.
It was a different world. You sort of moved out of Toronto, moved up here and relaxed, and it was wonderful.
Well, coming up for the whole summer, like 2 months, because
Yes.
my dad was a teacher, so it was like, it was a different world, and going back to the city seems strange.
I've been involved with the sailing club over the years and done a fair bit of racing and pleasure sailing as well. So it's been a big part of my life on Lake of Bays. It's been boating.
For the millennium, a group got together, had a meal catered in one of the cottages, and we all came together for that big night.
Wow.
And it was cold and they set up a tent and put down straw so we could dance.
Yeah.
It's just the most wonderful thing. And I think everybody on the point was there or represented that night.
My wife would come up for the entire summer, and when I would come up Friday night, they'd usually have a little concert that they did in front of the fireplace, or anything else they could dream up, and it was a great place to be.
My kids love every minute of it. And they won't change anything.
They love it here. If I was to sell it tomorrow, they'd kill me probably. But we're also very lucky that we have super neighbors.
We do.
Great neighbors, I gotta emphasize that.
The neighbors are unbelievable.
People here are all so wonderful.
And a lot of them have been here for years and years and years. The Hannahs in particular.
We have some very good friends here.
If you ever had any issues or any concerns, any fires or anything like that, the neighbors were right there. If you needed a babysitter, there was no problem finding one. It was great.
They tend to help each other, put docks in, take docks out, and repair boats.
The sense of community that we have here.
It's a close-knit, supportive cottage development without being overwhelmingly big.
The kids were raised here. Margot's been coming up for every single summer. I mean, the first summer we came up, there was a little bit of trepidation, I think, about being up here on our own. But once you got to know people, the kids started going to the sailing club. They started meeting friends. You know, as soon as school was out, Margot and the kids would hop in the car and up they'd go.
It's a very special part of Lake of Bays, I feel, and we're very fortunate to be here.
Part of anything is taking care of it, and we've taken care of this. We really love this place. We actually had it winterized, so we could come up in the winter time. So we're one of the few cottages up here that actually can be used in the winter, and it's a magical place.
My husband was transferred around a lot because he was with highways, and so we lived in so many different places in Ontario. But I always felt that the cottage was there. I sort of felt that that was where my roots were.
Not valuable monetarily, but for what it provided for our children, for Bob and I, because we spent many, many years here. It was valuable. It was the most important part of our life together with our kids, and it's still bringing them back.
Things come along, and so it even means something to grandchildren who aren't here that much, but they feel something for it, you know?
This is the family, the base for the family. This is where we congregate more than we do in the city now.
Yeah, we're so fortunate to have this, you know, to have a place to come to that's so beautiful and so peaceful usually, and you know, just all the memories of growing up here, and knowing the neighbors when they were little,
And they
seeing
were
them
always
grow
there
up
for you,
and-
weren't they?
Yes.
Everybody was always there for you if you needed them.
Mhm.